Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Crypto Byte. Today is Friday, May 6th, and it's been another volatile week in the crypto markets, and today is looking like it will not be an exception to that as we have the traditional equity markets opening down, hitting new local lows and bringing the crypto market with us. So much needed weekend coming up here, but before we dive into some charts and some more, CJ, how you doing today, my friend?
Doing good, Monty. Thanks. Yeah, interesting to see that deal between 3AC as well as Terra, and basically them trading or selling 500 BTC for UST. Doesn't really reflect that much of a bullish view, regardless of how they try to spin it. Regardless, though, I'm excited to take a look at some data today, especially with traditional markets continuing to go down. But also want to talk about stable coins and look at USDT dominance and how that's played out throughout various periods in Bitcoin's lifespan. It can give us an idea of how much capital is truly sidelined and when those levels have reached extremes in the past. So excited to go into that and more, but how you doing, Monty?
Yeah, doing well, CJ. Excited to look into the analysis. Obviously, stablecoins are more or less the lifeblood of this crypto market, and by kind of looking at when they're on the sidelines versus when they're being actively applied to various assets is a great way to get the intentions of people in this market. So excited to dive into that. But I think a great starting point would be traditional equity markets, given the fact that, like I said, we are kind of in uncharted territory here this morning, CJ, as we are breaking down below these local lows into new lows here with the Nasdaq around 12.6 and with the Qs right around 300. We actually are kind of wicking up a little bit. We went down to all the way to 305. So some heavy sell pressure permeating these markets this morning. And, as you can see, and as you'd expect, given the last couple of weeks of price action, that is bleeding over into the Bitcoin and crypto markets in general. Bitcoin holding up relatively well, still at 35K. A lot of the alts cannot say the same, though. A lot of alts pulling back very, very hard this morning. And there's some that we've, talked a lot about, CJ. You had been pointing out that GMT starting to look very toppy up here. And as you can see today, continuation of this negative price action, kind of bringing to fruition that Bart Simpson pattern you'd been calling for.
Full Bart Simpson.
I'm seeing his head right here, Bart Simpson right there. And this is not unique to GMT, right? A lot of other assets that had this easy money being made earlier in the month and throughout April, a lot of those gains are being given back here now today as this market goes risk off. And as you can see, just by looking at my watch list here, I mean, lots of assets down across the board, pretty much the entire crypto market.
And Algo is the only thing I see green on that list.
Yeah, look at that. That World Cup news, I think, still lingering a little bit. But beyond that, just look at some of these alts. I mean, near another one that had tremendous positive price action today being sold into once again after actually having a nice bounce following that Fed meeting. So lots of the alts giving back the gains that we had been talking about over the last couple of weeks here today. And all of that's on the back of a underperforming traditional equity market. So until that changes, it's going to be tough to see any traction being gained in the crypto market in the foreseeable future. But really, CJ, we have this weekend. Obviously the sell pressure from traditional equity markets is affecting this crypto market. Perhaps this weekend with Bitcoin trading by itself, it could get something going. But I wouldn't necessarily count on it just because of the amount of fear that we're seeing in the space currently. But that's what I'm seeing from the traditional equity markets. What are you seeing here today, my friend?
Well, like I had mentioned earlier, I want to take a look at stablecoin ratios. And there isn't many that are very significant other than just USDT. My bad, my friend. I got to open up some system preferences. I'll be right back.
Okay, you're good. You're good. So while CJ comes back, one thing I did want to check out was the funding rate because, as the traditional indices kind of dip into lows here, the funding rate is starting to flip a little bit negative. If you look at a shorter time frame, one thing you'll notice is that we have shorts piling in. And that's something you'd expect given current market sentiment, given the fact that traditional equity markets are looking very, very weak. People are piling into the downside here. And just from an anecdotal perspective, even people in our community more eager to get short, now than ever. So To me, that's indicative of, strong short demand. Though that is, a sign that we could see some more sell pressure hitting this market as traders go short here. One thing that, if you've been in this market for a while, you'll know, leverage squeezes are one of the biggest catalysts to positive price action for Bitcoin, specifically when we're talking about showing divergence from traditional equity markets. So if we just look at, let me just quickly pull up one chart here. If we look at the correlation between Bitcoin and the Nasdaq historically, and what has led to those divergences in speculation, it has been short squeezes. And one most notable instance was last summer of 2021, when we were in the sustained period of negative price action. Sentiment was very, very negative. We were around 28K, 29K at this point here, right at the bottom. And people were calling for 20K pretty much across the board. And as a result, we saw shorts pile in. And one thing you'll notice is that, this led to a sharp decoupling from the Nasdaq. We saw a high correlation leaning into it as both were pulling back. But ultimately, that short squeeze was the catalyst that propelled us out of the bear market and broke our correlation from the traditional equity markets. So now, I think we need to look to a similar catalyst. I don't think it's coming anytime soon. Funding rates still aren't anything too crazy, but there is a significant premium being paid by short traders at these current levels. So whenever you see that, it tells us that, the bias has flipped. People are expecting more downside price action, but it also does set up for a potential short squeeze in the interim. So CJ, I see that you're back here, my friend. What are you seeing from the stable coin market?
So if we check out our chart up here, so a way that you can add this to TradingView is basically just by going to add, and then the symbol is USTD, basically like, Bitcoin dominance, obviously, except with stable coins. And then you can add it in a separate panel as well down here. But I've highlighted some of the critical areas in which we've reached extremes historically. And when people have really gone risk off or risk on, it's reflected in the stablecoin volume or the dominance within the market, which is quite interesting. I think that another thing that we can observe from this is that USDT has really only gotten more prominent throughout the last 3 to 4 years relative to various other stablecoins and how traders actively trade this market. As you can see now, we are overextended, hitting nearly 5% of the total market cap. Total crypto market cap is currently consisting of USDT, the Tether stablecoin. And, the past couple times we've got that, obviously you could have made the argument that we were in a bull market back then, and now we're in a bear market. However, I think that it still speaks volumes to acknowledge the point that there is an immense amount of sidelined capital. I still understand that you got to respect the trend and not try to be a hero, but we are definitely reaching extreme levels. Doesn't mean we can't go higher to 6 or 7. Nevertheless, we have not been pushed this hard in terms of sidelined capital in this market cycle yet. So interesting observation. Another thing I just want to take a look at in some of these macro models is that if we look at log growth curves, we checked on this yesterday, but we are actually, we've only gone below this level once in Bitcoin's history, and that was because of the COVID black swan. Obviously, the equity market's having a very strong effect, but we're only about 2% down from the bottom of this channel, which is roughly 33K. So that's an interesting target, at least for the interim. And then I think one of the broader macro targets that a lot of folks have looked at, and I think it's quite interesting from a log perspective and what we've seen throughout Bitcoin's history, we typically go down and touch this level, a couple different times. This is the linear regression. And, this level's coming up probably at about 25K. So when you stretch Bitcoin to its extremes and where it's performed historically, it looks like we have downside targets, if we continue to break down here. We're looking at roughly 25 to 33K for any type of macro accumulation levels. So I'm not really looking to short Bitcoin because I don't think there's a high risk reward ratio at these levels. Being said, I do think there's a lot of potential upside in shorting some of these alts that are particularly weak. Things like GMT. One of the others that I was going to mention when you were going over the Bart Simpson pattern was KNC. That one has really fallen quite hard. So I think that, one of the best things to do is just to be nimble and to pick some of the higher beta assets to potentially look for downside price action. being said, I think one quote that I heard that I thought was quite interesting is that the reason why most people miss bottoms is because they look quite ugly when they're actually occurring. And price action looks very, very ugly today. So
Yes, I completely agree. This is one of the ugliest days or weeks we've seen in quite a while here. And to your point, CJ, and to the point of Geo in the chat, it does look like alt season in the opposite direction. These high beta assets are falling hard. And one thing that I like to look to during these periods of time is Bitcoin dominance. So just quickly looking at this chart, and one thing that I like to do with Bitcoin dominance when we're kind of in these uncertain markets is just apply some technical analysis to this chart. So use the Bollinger Bands here, because for me, this is a great indication of when you should be in Bitcoin and when you should be in the altcoins. And basically, for those of you who don't know, Bitcoin dominance is essentially just the percent of the total crypto market cap that is comprised of Bitcoin at any given time. So when Bitcoin's gaining ground, this goes up. When Bitcoin's losing ground and the alts are outperforming, this goes down, like we saw over the last 5 days here. But one thing you'll notice today, starting to bounce in Bitcoin dominance, alts pulling back much harder than Bitcoin. So one thing to look for here, now that we've kind of come up to the top of this Bollinger Band, broken down below this middle band, is a potential bounce. I still think we have the possibility of correcting to 41.3%, perhaps even 41% before climbing higher. That would result in a continued bleed out from some of these higher beta alts. But once we do start to see Bitcoin dominance really start to turn up, perhaps show signs of a bullish engulfing candle at the bottom of a downtrend, kind of like we saw here just at the start of April, then perhaps that will be a good indication to start closing some of these shorts. Because like CJ said, it's not always easy to tell when you're in the midst of a bottom because the price action is so ugly. So I like to apply some other metrics, one being Bitcoin dominance. And just looking at that, it does still tell me that we have some room to run in some of these short positions on the high beta alts, but just look for a potential bounce in Bitcoin dominance as a sign that perhaps you should start closing out some of those short trades and looking to just move into stables or even into Bitcoin. So that's what I'm seeing from Bitcoin dominance, and I think it kind of speaks to the price action of this entire market that we're seeing today, with these altcoins really getting hit hard. So anything else you want to add here today, CJ, before we wrap things up?
Not particularly, just something that I want to talk about on the Doge of the day following this is some particular stocks with a lot of high short interest that I'm looking to perhaps buy some puts on or apply bearish strategies going into like the next 4 to 5 months. Not that I'm bearish on the collective market. That's not my view. However, I like this market neutral strategy of shorting some of the most stocks with the highest percentage of their float currently short, because even in bullish environments or market neutral environments, they still have tended to go down. So I like the risk reward ratio in that sense. If you look at a company by the name of BTBT, that was one that had immense short interest. And I initially was thinking it might have a short squeeze, but then, after some interesting price action and further investigation, I decided, no, it's better to just probably ride the trend on this one. And it continued to bleed for quite some time. And that's kind of the nature of a lot of these companies that, I will talk about and discuss. But just looking for ways to hedge and not trying to be a hero, just be nimble, I think is probably some good advice at this particular point. But yep, that's all I got. I'll leave it with you, my friend.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well there. In market conditions like these, you don't need to be aiming to make a ton of money. Preservation of capital is really key during these times. And, I think employing some of these hedging strategies with these short trades is a great way to do that. So we're going to go more in depth during our Doge of the day. As always, if you guys would like to join us there, you can do so at the link below me. CJ has some short ticker or some assets with some short interest to check out. And also I want to take a look at some particular assets that I think have a possibility of a continued correction. And thus I will be looking to go short those. But beyond that, please like and subscribe. It definitely helps out the channel a lot. But other than that, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you guys again on Monday